record of this computer. Okay, so to reiterate, I'll hopefully have a chance to get through. There are a lot of you, there are over 20 proposals. So we'll see how far I can get in an hour between one and two. But I do want to get them back to you before we meet with Miss Keenan this Friday. So please be aware we will be meeting this Friday as a group, and I would come prepared with your research design in mind, and maybe even have it like either on a screen or on a piece of paper where you can look at your independent variable and your dependent variable, and then your methods, like how you're going to collect data. The big thing about Miss Keenan and what she'll talk about is if your study is ethical. And so that's why an IRB, an institutional review board, exists, is to make sure that what you're doing is all above board. So she's going to give you some background to why we have to go through an IRB process. The reason why is because in the history of research and science, people have abused science. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment came to mind there. That was 40 years of our government racially really discriminating and being horrible to a group of people. There's also obvious the Nazis in World War II conducted horrible experiments with Jewish people in the concentration camps. So there's a Nuremberg Code. There's some other ethics that came out of, and there's also some experiments that people did in like the 50s and 60s where people were psychologically harmed. And so they developed this review board process to make sure that when you do your research, you're not harming somebody. So be prepared, and be prepared to ask questions. So Ms. Keenan is key in this process, because after you get approval from me, I'm assuming each one of you are going to get, I don't know, I have to look to see your designs. But when and if you get approval from me to do your experiment, we have to also get approval from Ms. Keenan and the rest of the review board at Northwestern. So it's not just my eyes that look at what you're doing. It's like the upper administration, Dr. Holliday, Ms. Keenan. There's a lot of folks that look at what you're writing here. So also please know when you get when you get your first writing assignment, like I'm not going to be super critical because I kind of threw in the APA thing at the last minute. If you wanted to try APA on your written proposal, you could have, and I'll give you some feedback. But when you do your lit review, you're going to get like a bunch of red ink and a bunch of marks from me, and you're going to be like, you jerk, I took so much time. And it's okay, because what your work is going to be is not only for my eyes, but it's other people with the university to get your work approved. So just know when I'm giving you feedback, I might be a bit of a jerk, but I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to help you. So when we get the approval process from other people, it's really simple, and therefore we don't have to worry. So I should be, hopefully I'm your highest hurdle in this. Usually if I give like a thumbs up, the IRB will send back a couple of suggestions. I will say this, very rarely after folks propose their study design, do you have no changes. I can't think of maybe one or two out of the 100 that I've supervised or so over the years where they've suggested no changes. So just know it's a two-way process. More minds on a project are better than one, and the IRB is not supposed to be there to to be really nervous about. It's really just supposed to be there as a quality checkpoint where what we're putting out is good and also ethical, where we're not going to harm people. So that's Friday. I wanted to give you a chance to think about Friday. So bring your designs, bring your have your informal proposal, because I will want you to ask questions of Ms. Keenan as she discusses. So there'll be time for questions at the end, and that way if you're worried about something, You can ask her, and I'll be available too to answer questions. Okay. With that said, thank you again. I saw a lot, over 20 of your written proposals were submitted, so I'm going to work through those. The other thing before Friday, let's check to see when our exam is. And also, we need some terminology. And so I've been really focused on, yeah, I've had the article review assignments and different things, and I'm really focused on you putting your research together. But we need a common vocabulary. And so the midterm, when it comes up, when that midterm exam comes up, it's going to be really you learning some terms. So when I communicate with you, or the review board communicates with you, you'll know what people are talking about. There are some standard terminology and concepts that you have to get in research, and therefore it's not the ultimate goal for you just to memorize terms, but it is necessary to an extent. So let me pull up the PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint for today is really designed to help you, like if you were going to study for the midterm when it comes up, the PowerPoint that we're going to use today would be something that, hey, I might want to take a look at that. So let's go ahead and share my screen. And let's try to continue working in Blackboard. I bet it makes me log in again. Yep. Okay, hold on. Yeah. And yes, I'm in research methodology right now. Uh-oh. Oh, also, one more thing. While I'm waiting on this, the IT department contacted me and said they've installed a new computer in our first room that we were using. And so I got that email yesterday, but I haven't had a chance to try the computer. So before I go back in there and step into a mess, I'm gonna go try the computer. But we may be switching back, and I know it's like, oh my gosh, we may be switching back to our former format. Okay, first off, let's check the syllabus to see when our midterm is. But let's pump the brakes. I will send out an email. I'll have a chance. I have another class I've got to teach in there tomorrow, so we'll see how it goes. If that class goes well, we'll probably, I know that it seems like this is working for people. So I don't know. We'll come to a decision after I check it out. Okay, so the exam is coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's the 23rd. That is actually going to be a Friday. So it's in a couple of weeks. But I want you to have some terminology to start thinking about. And so that's going to be the real key to our class today. You actually have the survey evaluation. Interesting. I'm going to roll that back probably. So there's supposed to be a survey evaluation due on the 12th. Our lecture today is going to feed straight into that. I think we're a little behind because of all those technology issues. I'll probably roll that assignment back to the 14th. That shouldn't be a super time-consuming thing because I'm not going to ask you to do like a lot of research. I'm going to put some things out there like that first article assignment. If you remember, I had like 5 things and you read through them and compared them and answered questions. It'll likely be similar to that assignment. So it shouldn't take you like a super amount of time. But I already know I'm going to roll that. It's not going to be due Monday, so don't freak out. It's going to probably be due Wednesday, if not Friday. So I'm really looking probably at Wednesday for that survey evaluation. Okay, so if you're looking for the PowerPoint, it's under PowerPoints. And the one we're going to use today is this one here. This is research methodology terminology. So if you did an abstract, I wanted to give, because this is on the heels of you just submitting your written proposal. So if you did an abstract, if you wrote one similar to this, you'd probably be in decent shape. Although this one needs to, I would say they need to define their dependent and independent variables on this one. So if you do write, and I will require you to, you'll need an abstract even with your lit review. So an abstract example, past research indicates that gender and age may have an influence on the perceived gender of infants. What is the writer doing right there with that sentence?
Setting you up to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's just an introductory sentence, and it's talking about past research. So really, they are summarizing. So if you're thinking about the big scope of things, an abstract is just like a quick outline of your whole paper, what you're going to do. And so in this particular abstract, the researcher chose to summarize the lit review, which is probably like 8 pages. So their lit review is all on gender and age and having an influence on the perceived gender of infants. The role of perceived gender of an infant and the gender of adolescents on ratings of the infant will be explored. What's the researcher doing with that sentence? Are they talking about past research now?
No, they're talking about like their present.
Yeah, so it's a really quick switch. This is a really condensed sandwich of what you're doing. So it's a really quick sit. You could have 2 sentences. So no, there's some flexibility. I'm just giving you an idea of what an abstract might look like. So you could have 2 or 3 sentences introducing your topic too. You might even throw a sentence in there. Recent press releases show that gender identity has become a hot topic in our society, a very politicized topic in our society. You could throw something else like that in there. But then that sentence, the role of perceived gender of an infant and the gender of adolescence on ratings of the infant will be explored. That's just introducing the topic of what you're doing here, what you're going to do. And then they get really specific. 36 junior high students, 18 boys and girls, will view a photo of a 3-month-old infant. Now it's getting really specific. So number of participants is important. Students will be told the infant, and now it's going into procedure. Students will be told the infant's name is either Larry, Laurie, or they will not be told the infant's name. Each student will rate the infant on 6 bipolar adjective scales. Now it's going in the instrument used. That'll be our next assignment. It's going into the instrument they're actually going to use to measure their dependent variable. It is predicted, and then they're given their hypothesis. It is predicted that both the name assigned to the infant and the student's gender will affect ratings. And then after that hypothesis, like the results, it's going into the discussion. Implications of the results for parenting and for future research will be discussed. So the first sentence here is like the lit review. The second sentence and third sentence and fourth sentence are like the methods section. The fifth sentence is like the results section. The sixth sentence is like the discussion section. So do you see what's happening there with that abstract? Is that making sense? So for all of those different like aspects of your study, you'll want to at least have 1 or 2 sentences in the abstract.
Okay, so you said the first sentence is over your lit review, the second, third, and fourth is over the method section. What did you say the fifth sentence was be over?
So it's those same 5 components in the same order. So you have your abstract. You're going to talk in your abstract. You're going to talk about your lit review, your methods, your results, your discussion. And you can use as many sentences as you like. You just don't want to go over a page, because an abstract is really super condensed. It's like what you produced for your assignment for last night or 2 nights ago. It's really similar to that. Okay. But I wanted to show you what an abstract looks like because you'll want to write this. This could change too. So I like to write this because it kind of guides me like, okay, here's what my thoughts, because I'm the kind of person like squirrel. Like I'll get distracted and I'll find something really interesting that I want to read and they'll be like, oh, what am I supposed to be studying again? And it's really easy to get lost in the forest when you're doing research. So I like to have this as like my blueprint to keep me on track. Now I could get in the weeds with the lit review and be like, I want to change my design. That's okay. You can. If you run into a situation where you've submitted a proposal to me, a really informal one right now, a couple nights ago. If you get into a situation where you go reading more literature and like, I want to change my design, you have some time. But if you do, don't just do it by the seat of your pants. At this point, because you've already told me a little bit of something what you're going to do, you need to email me and say, Dr. Randolph, I'd like to do something different. Okay? And raise your hand if you heard me on that. That's it. Thumbs up. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That way we're on the same page, and then you're not like, out doing a lit review and it's all for naught. The last thing I want you to do in this class is waste time because this class takes time. Okay, let's go ahead and get into what's going to be on the exam. Some of this will be review because we've covered this in different aspects of the class, but I wanted to give you like a really decent PowerPoint where, I can study that and hopefully, get through my exam and get a good grade on it. So here's the point where I asked for a reader, and I know we've covered this before, so don't worry. We'll cover it again so you get it. Dependent outcome variable. Actually, if somebody just read this slide, we're good. Colby, you good?
Yeah, I got it. Dependent outcome variable, a variable that is measured or observed from an individual. Reliability, the degree to which the results of a study can be replicated under similar conditions. Operational definition, the definition of an abstract concept used by a researcher to measure or manipulate the concept in a research study.
Okay. We've covered all of those throughout the class. And so again, it's just for you to kind of go back, study that. Reliability is also consistency. I think probably the terminology I'm thinking about on the exam probably used either replicated, repeatable, or consistency. Question. Looks like I've got randomized sample. And if you randomize a sample, you can repeat it. If you use people you know and you randomize the people you know, can that study really be repeated by another researcher? No, because nobody has the same circle of friends as you do. So that goes into when you describe your methods, and that's more of a convenient sample, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Operational definition is what part of the funnel? The big end or the little end? You have your concept, and then you have your operational definition. So your operational definition is the very small end of the funnel. All right. Now, this is new. This is from statistics, but it's necessary because when you start talking about your design, which is what we're going to start moving into, your assignment for next Wednesday, you're going to look at different instruments, and there's going to be scales of measurements on these instruments, and you're going to design your own instruments to a degree. I would like you to rely on things that are already published. But we need to know scales of measurement because these affect our variables. Okay, I'd like a reader here, please.
Nominal, non-ordered category responses Example, how do you feel today? Circle 1. Happy, sad, anxious, or excited.
Okay. So nominal, think of, if you are trying to think of a mnemonic on like nominal, trying to write on my screen. Think, name, the name we give to something. Also, nominal category would be things like, or also, category is a big word there too, because really you're just categorizing. If you're looking at a nominal variable, it's a category. These are discrete categories where it's not on a continuum. They're not really measured, they're just named. So if we have things like gender, if we have things like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, like classification. Sorry, I know that's slow, but that's me and my mouse. Gender, classification. Can anybody think of other nominal variables that I'm missing out on? I'm thinking one. Race. What else?
Groups,
What's that, Chelsea?
ages,
Well, so now ages is a little different, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So you could put somebody in like a category of like age 15 to 24.
I'm thinking like child, adolescent, adult, older, senior.
Yeah. Yeah, you could also the classification can like what I did there with freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, that can also go in a different category. But I want you to just really think about these as separate categories where these are not on a continuum. I mean, I guess you could kind of put happy and sad on a continuum, but anxious is different, excited is different. So if you're categorizing something, if you're just naming something, that's a nominal variable.
So is it basically like categories that don't necessarily have a rank, if that makes sense? Like it's just an answer.
Like that's like when I use freshman, junior, senior, sophomore, this could have a rank. I mean, yeah, you can argue that those could be ranked, but yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I'm glad you said that. So good terminology. They don't necessarily have a rank. All right, let's move on. And let's clear that. Clear my drawings. Clear my drawings. And let's stop annotating. Help, let me out of here.
Are these in the book where I could highlight them?
So yeah, they are. They would be in the book. I don't know what page, but yes. The next one, first one is nominal. It's just naming. And so another way. So let's say this will probably be the one that you all use. Let me go back to nominal one more time. Nominal. If you categorize like, so for instance, like parent, like I remember, Abriana, your research is looking at parents versus non-parents. I'll just put NP for non-parents. Those are categories you're creating. Those not like a real scale. These are not, I mean, you could say it's a scale, but it's a nominal scale because you're putting people in categories, parents, non-parents, traditional student versus non-trad student. Those are categories you're creating. Many of you, I would say all of you, are going to have nominal variables, and they're probably going to be your independent variables. Most times nominal variables end up being independent variables. Okay, that's good enough. let's move on. Sorry, that's the quickest way for me to get rid of all my annotations. Okay, now ordinal. Ordinal is pretty simple. Ordinal is if you have something that you can rank. To me, this is like the easiest one to remember because you think I've got it in rank order. Now, 1, 2, 3. So if you were ranked 55th in a class of 100 people, that's ordinal. If you ran a race with 6 people and you finished first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, that's an ordinal scale. It's order or rank. I don't know how that one's just pretty simple. You have 10 people, and let's say you all take an exam. You just rank them. You don't even look at the percentage they scored on the exam. You rank them first to 10th. That's an ordinal scale. Any questions about this one? Order or rank?
These are on page 141.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right. So let's go on to the next one. Oh, somebody's trying to get in. Here we go. The next scale, and these two can be a little trickier. And sometimes I got these confused as a student. But the next scale is interval. An interval, just think of equally spaced intervals. Okay? They're numerical responses, and values are not ratio. They're not in a ratio. So 2 is not necessarily twice as good as 1. You're like, wait a minute, it's like in between ranked and the ratio scale. And we'll see what a ratio scale is in just a minute. So if you create let me add a footnote. Many of you will probably use Likert type scales. A Likert type scale is, it's usually 7 responses. A Likert type scale, and you've all seen these, because if you've ever done like a satisfaction survey, how satisfied are you with your service? 1, your service was very poor. 2, poor. 3, slightly poor. 4, average. 5, slightly good. 6, good. 7, excellent. That's a Likert type scale right there. That is an interval scale. Most of you, well, maybe not most of you, but many students use interval scales. I use many interval scales in my dissertation. They are good because they allow some robust statistics to be used, but they're not quite as good as ratio. All right, so interval scales. Think number scale, but then think equally spaced numerical responses. And here's how you discern that. So pay close attention. Ratio scales, here's the big key on understand difference between ratio and interval scales. Ratio scales have a true 0. So remember that Likert type scale where very poor, poor, somewhat poor, average, somewhat good, good, excellent. Was there a 0 in there? No. These have a true absence of something. So time has a true 0. Height, you could have 0 height. You could have no height. Accuracy, so you could have 100 questions on a test and get 0 right. I mean, hopefully that wouldn't happen. But so ratio scales have a true 0. And we can do the most robust statistics on a ratio scale. I would say age is a ratio scale because you could have a true 0. You could have somebody who's not born yet. You have a true 0. So in that case, and also think somebody who's 2 years old is twice as old as somebody who's 1. Somebody who's 3 years old is 3 times as old as somebody who's 1. See, there's a ratio that you can do with this too. You can't make a ratio with interval scales. These two get tricky. The other, you'll get nominal, you'll get ordinal, rank. Interval ratio get a little tricky. Just know ratio has a true zero. That'll get you out of the bail, out of the jam. Questions? Okay, so I would pay attention to this slide and some of the examples I'm using because you'll probably have to apply. Like, what sort of a scale is a time measurement of a race? And it'll give you the 4 like multiple choice questions there. Okay. All right, so this is giving you more examples. A nominal unordered categories. Like, yeah, so you could be sampling people from across the United States and just say, hey, list the university where your degree was earned. Northwestern, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma University, East Central, whatever. You're just naming something. Ordinal, ordered categories, letter grades earned in a course, rank order. I would honestly argue that like classification, freshman, junior, senior, sophomore, those would be an ordinal scale, and they could be. Interval, think Likert type scale without a true zero. Numerical categories without a true zero. Ratio, numerical categories with a true 0 point, like age measured in days since birth. Okay. All right, let's move on. Our 4 types of scales. So you'll be using those scales, and that's important when we start doing our statistics later on, but it's also important for our methods. All right, validity and response scales. I'd like a reader, please.
Constructability indicates that a survey measures the behavior it is designed to measure.
Very good. So yeah, accuracy. Is it an accurate measure of the construct that it's trying to measure? Nonverbal scale.
Nonverbal scale, survey response scale that involves pictorial response categories for participants with low verbal skills.
For example, children. So
Right.
those smiley faces with like, if you go to the doctor and it says how much pain you're in, it's like 1 is you're smiling, 2 is you're kind of like this, 3 is you're like this, 4 is you're like this, 5 is you're like this, 6, it gets progressively worse where you're bawling. So yeah, and I actually had a student do that a couple of years ago, use a nonverbal scale. All right, and I like this. This is my favorite type of face validity because it's the easiest one. Face validity, on the surface, a study or scale appears to be intuitively valid. So like, for instance, if you're having a scale of happiness and you say, okay, this is Taylor Randolph's scale of happiness, and it's just a 5-point scale where it says very happy, kind of happy, neither happy nor unhappy, not happy, very unhappy. Yeah, on face, on face, on the surface, that's somewhat appears valid. Now I'd want to test that out. All right. Let's try this one. I'd like a reader for this whole slide, please. And Beatrice, you're like not sideways today. I'm glad you got that worked out. So
Yeah, I just looked up on Google how to fix my Zoom stuff.
and you're not laying. I just thought you were laying down for class. So. I'm kidding. Stanley, you want to try this one?
Inter-observer, inter-rater reliability, a measure of the degree to which different observers observe or code behaviors in similar ways. For example, in a study using naturalistic observations, there are typically multiple observers of the behaviors of interest, either observing at the same time to ensure that all behaviors are recorded or observing at different times to allow the participants to be observed for longer periods of time.
All right. So that's just making sure you're being consistent with another rater. So a few years ago, a couple of students collaborated to do some research about mood after gym, after working out at the gym. And so when they did this, they were looking at appearance. Did they appear sweaty? Did they appear fatigued? And so how do you define sweaty? Is it sweat on your brow? Is it your shirt's wet? So they needed to make sure that between the two of them, they had an accurate measure. That's inter-observer or inter-rater reliability. Independent variable. We've covered this before, so this one should be fairly simple for us. I'd like someone to read, please.
Independent
slash predictor slash grouping variable.
You're good. Go ahead.
The researcher manipulates this variable or uses it. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead, man.
The researcher manipulates this variable or uses it to predict an outcome, an antecedent. The researcher is able to manipulate nominal groups. Therefore,
Oh, you're good.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Therefore, these can become independent variables, IVs. I don't know if you guys heard me completely.
No, that's right. So the big thing here with independent predictor grouping variable, as a researcher, you can manipulate this. That's the biggest key word here. It's something, instead of measure, this is something you manipulate. That's always an IV, independent variable. Now, I will say that nominal variables that we covered, these oftentimes become independent variables, nominal groups. So putting that definition into action quickly here. So the researcher manipulates this variable or uses it to predict. So it could also be a predictor variable. So again, that ice cream sales, I'm predicting that as ice cream sales go up, my ice cream sales are my predictor, violent crime's going to go up. That's my that's my dependent variable or outcome variable. A predictor variable is an IV, an outcome variable in a correlational study is a DV. Okay, let's keep going. And this is just another screen of independent variable. I'll read it. A variable in an experiment that is manipulated by the researcher, such as that the levels of the variable change across or within subject in the experiment. I like the way that's worded. Just nix that one. Types of manipulation. Okay, so how can you manipulate something in a study? So a true experiment would be like an experimental group and a control group. So if you were doing a treatment for depression and the treatment was therapy, your therapy group would be your experimental group. Those that didn't get therapy would be your control group. So types of manipulation is a type of treatment or situation. So in the studies I've had in the past where people study the influence of music on mood and physiological response, they're manipulating the type of music. Again, that's an IV type of music, independent variable that people are listening to. As the amount of a factor in a treatment or situation, it can also just be putting people in different groups. So like when you do a survey and you're looking at people who are parents versus non-parents, I'm just grouping them in I'm not even manipulating much, but I am manipulating how I put these people into groups, different groups. oftentimes is an independent variable. And so these are also, I said independent variable, these are also officially recognized as quasi-independent or subject variables to allow comparison of groups. Some examples of common quasi-independent variables used in psychological research include gender, age, personality types, ethnicity. Please know, as I speak to you, yes, officially they're quasi-independent, but I just refer to them as independent variables. Okay, now the next slide has to do with different sources of bias and order effects. Here's an effect of order that wasn't accounted for on a research design, and therefore the researchers lost some points on their design. So, order effects. Let's say that we're exposing people to different types of music and then measuring their blood pressure. So let's say, for instance, we had everybody in the experiment, we were able to have 100 participants. People listen to rock music first, and then right after rock music, they listen to classical. Well, it's tough for me to write with the mouse, but hopefully you get the idea. And then right after classical, they listen to rap. Let's say that the rock song was so fast, let's say it's 120 beats per minute, because really what this is, research has found it's the number of beats per minute. That's what's driving your physiological response, beats per minute. Classical was 60, and the rap was 90. Let's say that we change this up, and let's say we don't change it up. And so the order effects we have are, the person's blood pressure was high blood pressure here. Let's say it was 135 over 90. People got upset over 90. Say the average blood pressure measurement here for classical music went back down to 120 over 80. That's the average blood pressure for folks. And then for the rap music, it went up a little bit more. It went up to 125 over 85. So then in the experiment, they said, classical music calms people down. What's wrong with that hypothesis based on how we wrote this out? That's what they came out with. So their conclusion in their discussion section, the researchers said, classical music calms people. What's wrong with that? Based on the order of this. Because it looks accurate, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, Patricia.
Well, who says that 60 equals calm behavior or a calm mood?
Well, this is just,
And who came up with the 135 to me?
so this is let's take that. So this would be a blood pressure measurement, 135 over 90. So let's say these are average blood pressure measurements up here. As they go through these different groups. What I would argue is that 120 over 80 is the average blood pressure anyway. So the way that we would then control for this, which our researcher didn't do, is they needed a baseline. They needed people to come in and take their blood pressure before they even listened to any type of music. So you have an order effect. Also, what you'd want to do is over time, the next 100 participants switch this up. Now they listen to classical music first, then they listen to rap music, then they listen to rock music. Then you have another group where you listen to rap music first, and then you listen to rock music, and then you listen to classical music. You see what I'm doing? Because this could impact, and then if you had different measurements of blood pressure, you're controlling for that order. So I'm just saying, when you design an experiment and you start like really doing true like experiments on somebody, you want to try to control for the order you're doing something if you can, because you can be subject to order effects, and then it's not even really something that had to do with your experiment. There was some bias in the way you did your experiment. Is that
So what you're basically saying is the order effects, it could change depending on the order that you do it. It could change the effect or the
yeah,
outcome.
exactly. That's it. Exactly. So you got it. As a complicated one, but I'm glad you tracked with me. Order effects. The next one is testing effects. And testing effects, there's something that is called the Hawthorne effect. It's really closely related to this. Anybody know what the Hawthorne effect is?
Isn't it when there's a bias because they know they're being tested or something like
Yeah,
that?
there's a bias because they know they're being watched. And so, for instance, like the lab coat thing, people actually, when they go into the doctor, their blood pressure tends to go up a little bit because there's a little bit of anxiety with that white lab coat, right? And so if we had white lab coats on when we're taking that blood pressure for our music experiment, again, we need to have that baseline measurement so we can control for, and maybe they get used to us after a while. And therefore, like at the beginning of the experiment, they sit down, their blood pressure is a little high, 125/85. And then by the time they listen to all this music and they've been sitting there for 10 minutes and they don't have like any music playing, maybe their blood pressure goes down to their regular baseline, which is 120/80. So testing effects, Hawthorne effect, really, these are similar in that you influence the results because somebody knows they're being watched or they're part of an experiment. And that's hard to control for. There's also something called regression toward the mean. And what that means is when you do an experiment and you're collecting data, a lot of that data is going to be like if we all ran a race, there will be some of us that are, and let's say this is not rank order, this is a time, and we're running a race and we want our time to be minimal, so we're running a 100-yard dash. There will be some of us that will be super quick and run that in around 10 seconds. That's really fast. It's like world record almost. I mean, and there'll be some of us that are slower, and maybe we run that 100-yard dash in like 30 seconds or so. But a lot of us will be clustered around the middle. Most of us will be around this middle. Let's say, just for simplicity, let's say that middle point is 20 seconds. Okay? And let's say we also control for age. So let's say we're all 25. I wish we were all 25, right? We're all 25 years old, and we run this race, and some of us were super fast, had 10 seconds. Most of us were clustered around 20 seconds, which is the mean. And then a few of us were kind of slow down here at 30 seconds. So what regression towards the mean says, this basically says, if you do an experiment, and let's say we're gonna do some training, and we're gonna train everybody in this group about diet, breathing exercises, and then speed exercises. And then we race again, and then when we race again, everybody that was in that experimental group, our mean came down to 15 seconds. We're like, awesome, that's an effect. If we ran the stats, we had enough participants. I bet we could show that our training program significantly decreased the sprinting time for a 100-yard dash. Well, if we did it again and there wasn't a true effect, we'd expect things to get, we'd expect regression to happen toward the mean. In other words, over time, things tend to gravitate more toward the middle. I didn't do a really super job explaining that, but just know that that's the concept we're going after there. Okay. Oh my gosh, I ran out of time. Okay, I can't believe that. You guys are such a super group. I've got a few slides left. We don't have time to cover them today. So here's what we'll do. Please show up Friday with your research ideas to be able to ask Miss Keenan. She'll tune in, give you the history of IRB, and we'll go from there. There will be no lecture from me that day. If we get out early, we get out early. Monday, I'm going to talk a lot about scales of measurement. Okay, and I'll release that assignment because and I'll continue on this because we have a little bit of time before our exam, but I needed to do review and get through this so you have something to study. Any questions before we get out for Wednesday?
So depending on your class tomorrow, will we be meeting in person on Friday, or will we still be meeting through Zoom?
Okay, that's a great question, Fernando. Let me check. I will send out an email to let everybody know where we're meeting. Okay, gang, take care. I will see you soon. Thanks for your attention today. I know it was dry. We just got to get through it. See ya.